Hey guys, how's it going? Today we're going to be tackling the dahlia patch out in the cut flower garden. I wanted to talk through our overwintering experiment. You know, dahlias are a zone 8 through 10 or 8 through 11. We garden in a zone 6, so it's much too cold for them normally to winter over like our other perennials that we plant out. Typically we have to dig them, store them, divide them, replant them every single year, and it's a tremendous amount of work. So we decided last fall to mulch them up really well, just to see what would happen. This is our dahlia patch. We have 6 60-foot rows and one 45-foot row, or 45 or 47. Anyway, it houses approximately 400 dahlias, just over, like 405. And you can see, based on the green, how many came up. Some of them are way ahead, and it must be a variety thing. I really wish I would have labeled everything. But some of them are huge, like this, and some of them are just barely starting to pop through the ground. Like, look at this little one right here. Today is May 29th, though, so I figured, you know, by the end of May, we should have a pretty good idea of how many of these will come up. I mean, it may be a situation where if we just left everything alone and didn't plant anything in the empty spots, that the tubers that are there may still come up. I did test dig one of the spots, though. It's one spot that I could still see stalks from last year, and the tubers that were in that hole did not look good. See that right there? So I dug it up just to see, like, well, is there a viable tuber? I mean, this one right here, if the top hadn't have rotted, it's still firm, but this one may have just seen a little bit more moisture than the others. So, you know, I don't think anything would have come of this. You know, maybe, I don't know. Where did this one come from? Because that looks fresh. Anyway, who knows? And here's a look back in this direction. Boy, I can't even believe, like, look at this one. Loving its life. Okay, we're gonna sit here under the shade of this little apple tree. It's quite perfect. I've got tubers in here, so I didn't want them to be sitting right out in the full sun. But so last fall, we came out here, cleaned up the tops of the dahlias that had already died back after a hard frost, and then we rolled out silage tarp over the top. And the reason for that was to keep excess moisture away, because even though we're high desert and we are typically a lot drier than a lot of other places, we still get a ton of winter and spring moisture. That's when we get the bulk of our moisture. So we wanted to protect them from that, because I do believe that that's probably the #1 reason why they start to die out, is because they rot. So the silage tarp went down, and then we did a layer of about, I want to say it was a foot or more of straw leaves. So we started to, when we were mowing the lawn and picking up leaves and things with the mower, Aaron would come and dump that stuff out here on top of the straw rather than dumping it out in the other property. So we ended up with a pretty good thick layer of stuff out here. And then we started to clear that all off once we had nighttime temperatures that were hovering right around freezing and above, which was, oh boy, mid to late April. So they haven't been uncovered for too awful long. We do have our drip tape run to them right now, and we have run that a few times, but not a lot. In fact, I come out here and, well, Aaron will turn the whole zone off completely, or I'll turn off the individual rows, because I do have 2 rows of zinnias planted in this same watering zone. But my point being, they haven't had that much moisture from us. It's just whatever rain has come from the sky, and they look pretty good. Okay, I've written down all of our numbers so that I didn't forget. So our whole patch is 405 dahlias, roughly. I mean, I did a count this morning, and I think that's pretty accurate. We dug up about 75 varieties out of this space last fall, because I didn't know how this experiment would go. So I thought, well, let me just, you know, mark a few of these that were really pretty that I want to make sure to have from year to year, and that will allow us to have at least some to put back in this space should none of them survive. Those tubers that were dug were put in the greenhouse right underneath the heater on accident, and they stayed there for a night, and I lost a bunch of them that night. So I ended up being able to pot 115 of those that we dug. So we dug up 75 mounds, but I was able to divide them, and I had many more than we actually dug. So I've got 115 potted in the greenhouse right now. I brought 2 of them out just to show you guys what they look like right here. Not all of them are this big, but a lot of them are. This one is the variety called Pooh, and this one is Smarty Pants. So 405 total, dug 75. That leaves us with 330 we left in the ground. So as of today, May 29th, we have 189 of them came up. So that's just under 60%, which I was trying to do the math on, you know, how much it would cost to replace tubers versus the labor it takes. It takes a tremendous amount of labor to get these up out of the ground. They're a total pain to store and to dig. They're so fragile. I think in the end, we're still ahead by even losing what we did, 40% of what we left in the ground. So I think what we're planning to do is going forward, we'll probably just keep doing the same thing, because this dahlia section, I'm not planning on expanding this. If anything, we will make it smaller. And sometimes you want to switch up varieties. You don't want to just grow the same old ones every single year. There are those few you do want to grow every year, but you know, you try out new ones. Sometimes they don't look quite like you hoped they would, or they don't perform very well, that sort of thing. So if we lose some every year, it just opens up opportunity to plant different varieties, which I think is fun anyway. And I think after all is said and done with the tubers that I have here that I've ordered, Florette sent out some, plus one of you guys sent me a few tubers as well. After I get all of those in the ground, I think I'm going to be able to give away some of my potted ones. I ordered a box full from Eden Brothers. We'll run through those varieties here in just a second. These are the ones that Florette sent out for us to try. And then a gal by the name of Christy sent out some dahlia seeds and some tubers from Tillamook, Oregon. Oh, look at that growth. Love it. I'm trying to think if there's any other details I'm missing. We did decide when we overwintered them to do the silage tarp first and then the mulch after, which we were initially thinking of doing it the opposite way, just in case we get some pretty fierce winds, and we thought, oh, if we have a whole bunch of straw just laying out there exposed, it's going to blow all over the place. But if we did the mulch first, we thought, well, if we cover that with a silage tarp and keep it nice and warm and dry under there, it's going to be a perfect breeding ground for rodents. There's a perfect little cozy home right near the tubers, and I thought that that was more risky because, you know, they might dig and eat the tubers. They are edible. I saw a recipe for dahlia bread. I can't imagine that that tastes very good. Like, you use the tubers after you store them because the sugars are enhanced, kind of like in potatoes. I don't know. I don't think I can wrap my brain around it. It's kind of like the purple potatoes. I did not grow any of those this year because I just can't get past eating a purple mashed potato. Ugh. Anyway, that's all there is to it. It really was a simple project. You know, removing the stuff from the top. It probably took, I want to say, Paul and Bethany worked on the whole overwintering process. I want to say it took them a day probably to put the silage tarp and straw down, and then it probably took them a day to remove it. 2 days versus 2 weeks is what it usually takes to dig, clean, store. I mean, you're doing other things around that project, but that kind of looms large and it takes up so much time, and it's not a fun process. I know they don't enjoy it, and I know I did not enjoy it when I did it. And unless you have a machine, I see those machines you can take through your fields, kind of like harvesting potatoes, and you can harvest tubers that way. I think that that might be pleasant, but digging them up by hand is not. Okay, so I want to go through the varieties that we have today before we run out into the garden. Ones that Christy sent out are, this one's Juicy Fruit, and the other one is Maniac. The ones that Florette sent out, we have Snoho Skip, Bloomquist Tory Pea, Peaches and Cream, I love this one, Sandia Brocade, and Puffin Stuff, and Sandia Panama. I think there's a couple tubers in each one of these bags. There's 6, 8, 10, so there's 12 tubers in here. I'm gonna line these up so we can go through them quicker. Here we go, there's a whole bunch of different ones. We've got Gerrie Hoek. Each one of these bags holds 2 tubers, but they're big clumps. I'm always really happy with the quality from Eden Brothers. We have Café Twist, I think. There's Linda's Baby, Peaches, Mystery Day, Red Labyrinth, Brown Sugar, Sweet Nathalie, Imperialis. I got 2 bags of the Imperialis, 2 bags of the Sweet Nathalie. We have Beausoleil mix, Doris Duke, Wizard of Oz, Frank Holmes, Rip City, and Linda's Mix. A few of these I have grown before, but I lost them in the greenhouse heat. Linda's Baby, Sweet Nathalie, Wizard of Oz, what was the other one? Brown Sugar. And I liked all of those so much that I wanted more of them out here. The only variety that I lost in the greenhouse that night that I could not find to replace was B-Man, which I grew for the first time last year, and I only had 2 hills, and I liked them so much that we dug both of those hills up. And I was so bummed that they dried out because, you know, B-Man is what we call Benjamin, and it was a beautiful purple and white. I liked it actually way more than I thought I was going to, because I typically don't like stark contrast in colors in a flower, like having, you know, stripes in a flower, that sort of thing, but it was just so pretty. So hopefully one day I'll have a B-Man in the dahlia patch again. But What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with the tubers first because they are new, mostly new varieties. And then whatever holes we have left in the end, I'll go through the greenhouse ones and pick out the ones I wanna save the most. And those will be planted. And then whatever we're left with will go to new homes. Real quick, the anatomy of a dahlia tuber. I know we go over this every year, but it bears repeating because we don't do this, you know, all year, every day. So sometimes it's good to have a reminder. You've got the body, you've got the neck, which typically, I mean, the length will vary depending on the tuber. Some will be really long and skinny, some will be a lot shorter, some you can hardly distinguish it at all. And then you have the growth point or the eye, and you can see this very clearly. This is a great example of a complete tuber right here. So typically we dig our hole 4 to 6 inches deep and we lay it down sideways like this with the growth point facing up. I usually scatter some biotone starter fertilizer in the holes, and this whole area has already been amended with land and sea. That's what we top dress with, and we'll probably come through when I'm all done planting in the next week or two, and we will amend with land and sea again. Aaron's done mowing. What are you doing? Oh, he's testing sprinklers. The grass in this area is really looking good, you guys. It's coming right along. This is the newest spot we seeded this spring. I think this is the nicest one too, honestly. The orchard looks awesome. I did ask Aaron to mow it today because it was getting out of control. I think we're gonna have to mow it probably twice as much as I thought. I'm thinking every third time he mows, he'll come out here and cut this one down because it grows so fast. And he mows it about twice as high as he does the rest of the lawn, so it's still a little bit bigger, but it grows so fast. And it's beautiful, I love it, but I do wanna keep it from, you know, wanting to flop over. I don't want it to start blocking sprinklers and that sort of thing. All right, so I've got my auger out here. I'm just gonna go through and zip some holes in the ground. I am gonna ID the new ones I put in the ground, and then as these start to bloom, I'm going to try to label them with these great big labels. These are the Rapiclip large T labels, the 13-inch ones, and they've got a nice big area to write on because it is incredibly hard if you've got too tiny of labels next to your plants to find them once the plants grow up. So I've switched to all of these in the whole garden. In fact, let me show you. It makes it so nice because you can just walk down rows and you can easily see what's going on. I'm going to also pop them out into the walking path a little bit further instead of right at the base of the plant. Over the years, you kind of just learn what works and what does not work. So throughout this whole space, I've used these big white tags. And it's nice because you can fit the whole variety name on each tag. You're not having to abbreviate anything. It's just very handy. Our volunteer larkspur is looking really nice. Look at this, about ready to bloom. We've got some Clarkia bloom, stalk is starting to bloom. Campanulas have color, whitefinch orlea, roses are blooming beautifully. And I noticed the first Nicotiana bloom this morning. We'll go through soon, maybe in the next week or so, and do a flower tour out here. Oh, the delphiniums are starting to bloom. Oh, look at that. We'll be able to cut some stems here, probably in the next day or two when these open just a little bit. Love it. Okay, let's get these planted. Ready to plant. We've got all the holes dug, biotone starter fertilizer in all the holes, and I just went ahead and side dressed all the ones that have already come up with the fertilizer as well. This first row is the one that we dug the most tubers out of, so I had to dig the most holes here. I'm not sure the ratio of how many dug versus how many lost in this row. I do know that this is the row where we had pink varieties, the first couple of rows anyway. I tried when we went in last year to do them color coordinated, or color blocks rather. So like all the pinks, all the oranges, all the yellows, whites, purples, and reds in the last one. And I'll try to kind of stick to that as close as possible, but I think going forward, a jumble of color is going to be what kind of happens. Okay, so what I did, instead of writing out 4 labels, or 2 or whatever, you know, based on how many tubers I had, I just wrote 1 label and then indicated how many of each, so I know the first 4 are the Sweet Nathalie. So instead of putting them, I usually put them like right next to the stalk of the plant. I want to put them out a little bit so that we can find them a little easier. Now it's interesting because on the Eden Brothers bags it says planting depth enough to cover with 2 inches of soil. I don't think I've ever planted them quite that shallow. I usually see instructions varying between 4 to 6 inches. I usually go in at right about 4 inches, and that seems to do really well. I want to show you close up on the first few how I plant them. You can see the ones from Eden Brothers come like with a stalk, and then there's 3 or 4 tubers. This one that's kind of dangling is no good. Oh, that just popped right off. Okay, well, so now we've got 2 that we can plant. There is a growth point right here on this one. This is a viable, and there's fresh root right there. And then this one has a growth point as well. So like with this one here, we're going to come in, kind of hollow out our hole a little bit, and we'll plant this tuber on its side with the growth point facing up. Just like that, and we'll cover it over. Now this one's a little bit different because the growth's coming up from the stalk. So I'll plant this one a little bit more straight up in the hole. Down, and there we go. Next one, I'm going to plant this whole clump, growth point facing up. You can see it right there. I shoot for roughly 12-inch spacing, but you can go 12 to 18. That works out just great. So we're just going to continue on with all the rest of these, and then we'll start in with plants once we run out of tubers. So here we go. All right guys, all of the tubers are in the ground. You can see white tags where I put all of them. So now we're going to focus on the plants we've got, which I actually think it's going to take every single one of the plants that I have to fill up our space. But they're looking really nice. And I think I'm going to try to set these out first in the right color rows and see how far we get with that, and then we'll plant them. So like this one, what is this? This is Old Rose, the Old Rose mix, which is a mix of pinks. So this one I will just take and set next to a hole that we have prepared. Let's see, so right here. That way we can see how many we have of each variety and if we need to kind of shift things a bit. I don't know, maybe that'll work, maybe it won't. But that's what I'm gonna do. So we've got this gator load, I'm gonna get them all out, and then I think I've got enough to fill one more gator or close to it, and we'll bring those out here in a minute. guys, I've got them all in the ground, and I did end up using all of the dahlias that I had in the greenhouse. I'm super thankful for those. And I do have a few holes left over in the very last shorter row, which I'm thankful for in a way, because I still have some of those Rosella hibiscus seedlings in the greenhouse, which they get quite large, and I don't know if they benefit from staking, but this will be, you know, all staked. We'll have the strings run eventually. We usually take the strings down. It's easier to get around and plant and do all that, and then we tie the strings back up later once they've put on a little bit of growth. But anyway, I'll be putting some of those hibiscus in those spots, so that's really nice. I was kind of wondering where I was going to put those, like in a flower bed. I don't think they're perennial here, so anyway, that's going to work out perfectly. I did water them in today, even the tubers. Some guides will tell you not to water the tubers until you see some green growth above the ground. I've always watered them in initially, and then I keep a super close eye, making sure that the ground doesn't stay too wet. And that's probably really good advice in areas that gets more rainfall. We just are typically pretty dry, especially like going into June. So watering them in initially, I feel like gives them a good start, kind of moistens the soil around them. The other thing is pinching. You know, some of these are up to a point where you could go in and pinch the central stem out. Like this one right here, you could come in and you could pinch it out just like that. And that usually produces, or they say it produces, a well-branched, more prolific plant. I don't typically pinch our dahlias, or I never have out here. I'd never go through and pinch them off like this one right here. And maybe I will do it after I notice how this one grows this year. I guess that what it does is that it produces longer stems and a more well-branched, more productive plant. But our dahlia patch, I never have a problem with it being productive. It's always full of blooms with super long stems. I've never had any issue with that, but that is something that growers mostly recommend. But we're not growing our dahlias to sell. We're growing them because I enjoy growing them. It's really fun for me to watch them grow. They're beautiful out in the garden. So personal enjoyment is pretty high there on the list as to why we grow them, but we also give away a tremendous amount of flowers. So other than just making sure they get consistent water, which they're set up on a system, so that's not a problem, and then making sure to get our strings tied to our T-posts, we will also be putting more T-posts in. You know, we don't do one giant long string. There'll be T-posts every 8 feet or so, or 7.5. I can't remember how it works out. So that's important once they grow up and need to be staked. Other than that, that's it. I don't fertilize them. I don't typically spray them with anything, or haven't. They just kind of are this self-sufficient little patch out here. So in season, after you plant them, they are one of the easier crops we have out here. It's just the saving them over the winter portion. So I think even with the amount of loss that we had this year, I don't know, I'm really happy with the results, just because, you know, I had enough to fill in most of the gaps in here, and I do want to grow new varieties every year. So having, you know, opportunities, that's what I look at it. Losing a plant is an opportunity to try something different, or a different variety, or a different type of plant. It allows for that, all while saving us a ton of work. So anyway, you guys, I will be giving you updates of this space as the season progresses. I can't wait to see it full of color and really even just green growth. I love seeing things in rows just growing happily. It's fun. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.